The Elder Scrolls is a series built around adventure. Everywhere you go, there's usually something waiting for you. An ancient ruin, a dangerous creature, a mysterious stranger, or a quest that can completely change the course of your journey. But what if you could find places where absolutely nothing happens? No quests, no enemies, no major events, no hidden treasure waiting to be discovered. Just a location that exists and continues existing without ever really needing the player. These places are fascinating because they show a completely different side of Tamriel. They aren't designed around constant action. Instead, they can feel strangely empty, forgotten, or even peaceful, making you wonder why they were included in the first place. Exploring the rare locations where the world seems to stop, the NPCs carry on with their ordinary lives, and for once the Dragonborn or any other hero isn't needed to save the day, makes the Elder Scrolls a different kind of game. These are the only places in the Elder Scrolls where nothing happens. There is something strangely fascinating about Dagon Fell in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Located on the northern coast of Vardenfell, Dagon Fell is a tiny settlement that feels almost completely removed from the enormous events unfolding elsewhere in the province. While the Nerevarine is busy uncovering ancient prophecies, navigating the politics of the Great Houses, investigating the Sixth House, and eventually confronting Dagoth himself, Dagon Fell seems to exist in an entirely different world. It has no major faction headquarters, no enormous political significance, and no grand storytelling that makes the settlement itself essential to the fate of Morrowind. Instead, it is a remote fishing and trading community sitting at the edge of the sea, surrounded by rocky terrain and ancient ruins, where the people who live there appear to be mostly concerned with their own small lives. That makes Dagon Fell a perfect example of a place where, in the grand scheme of Morrowind, almost nothing happens. And perhaps that is exactly what makes it so memorable. The first thing that makes Dagon Fell feel different is its location. It is far away, very far away. Northern Vardenfell is already remote compared with major settlements around Vivec and Balmora. Dagon Fell pushes that isolation even further. The settlement sits on the northern coast, surrounded by enormous stretches of wilderness and ocean. There are no major roads connecting it directly to the political centres of Morrowind. There is no bustling metropolitan area nearby, no imperial capital, no great house stronghold dominating the horizon. Instead, there is water, stone, sky, and a handful of buildings. The journey itself reinforces the feeling. Reaching Dagon Fell requires effort. You are not simply passing through it on the way between major cities. It is the kind of location you deliberately travel towards. That distinction is important. Most major settlements in Morrowind are connected to important quests or faction activity. Dagon Fell feels like somewhere that exists regardless of whether the player ever arrives. That is one of the most convincing aspects of its design. It doesn't feel like a stage built specifically for the Nerevarine. It feels like a real settlement. People live here, people work there, people trade, people sleep. And then they wake up and do the same things over and over again. The world does not revolve around you. That is particularly noticeable when compared with the rest of Morrowind. Vardenfell is experiencing an enormous crisis. Dagoth is awakening, the Blight is spreading, the Tribunal are losing their divine power. The Great Houses are competing for influence, the Empire is attempting to maintain control, the Nerevarine prophecy is beginning to unfold. Yet none of that seems to dominate everyday life in Dagon Fell. The settlement remains remarkably ordinary. This makes it one of the best examples of Morrowind's ability to create the illusion of a world continuing beyond the player's story. This place isn't necessarily important because something happens there. It's important because almost nothing does. The people aren't waiting for the Nerevarine to arrive and save them. They have their own routines, their own concerns, their own reasons for remaining in such an isolated place. That mundanity gives the settlement a strange charm. There is also something visually unusual about Dagon Fel. Its architecture is not particularly grand. The buildings are modest compared with the enormous cantons of Vivek or the elaborate mushroom towers of Talvenian territory. The settlement looks practical, functional, almost improvised. Its location beside the sea makes fishing and maritime trade important to its existence. The ocean stretches outward in every direction. Beyond it lies Solstheim, beyond that, the wider world. Standing there gives the impression that you have reached the edge of civilization. And once you reach that edge, there is nowhere else to go except back the way you came. That feeling is crucial to the atmosphere. Dagon Fel feels like a dead end. Not in a negative sense, rather it feels like a place where the world simply stops. There are no grand avenues leading onward, no enormous kingdom waiting beyond the next hill. The settlement sits quietly against the northern coastline. That makes it particularly effective for the theme of places where nothing happens. There is another fascinating aspect about this place: the surrounding ruins. Vardenfell is filled with evidence of ancient civilizations. Dwemer ruins, Daedric shrines, Dunmar tombs. Aelid ruins are absent here, but the landscape still feels saturated with ancient history. Dagon Fel exists among those remnants. The contrast is striking. Ancient civilizations once created enormous structures capable of surviving thousands of years. Now a few ordinary people live nearby, fishing and trading beneath them. History feels enormous. Human life feels tiny. The people of Dagon Fel are not necessarily trying to uncover every ancient mystery around them. They simply live beside it. That is an important distinction. To the player, an ancient ruin might represent an exciting dungeon. To the locals, it may simply be another landmark they've grown accustomed to seeing. The same principle applies throughout Morrowind. The player constantly encounters things that seem extraordinary. The locals often treat them as just ordinary. Dagon Fel captures that perfectly. It is also worth considering what this place does not have. There is no enormous political conflict defining the settlement. There is no great house headquarters. There is no major military garrison dominating the town. There is no major temple complex attracting thousands of pilgrims. Instead, its significance is local. That makes the settlement feel almost independent from the major storyline. The Nerevarine can arrive, stay for a while, complete whatever business brought them here, then leave. And Dagon Fel simply continues. This is perhaps one of the most immersive qualities of the location. The player isn't necessary. The settlement does not pause until the hero arrives. It was there before them. It will remain after them. That idea becomes particularly powerful when considering the Nerevarines' eventual victory over Dagoth. The player can save all of Morrowind. They can destroy the heart of Lorcan. They can end the Blight. They can fundamentally alter the history of Tamriel. Yet this place will still be there. Its people will still have ordinary problems. The sea will still crash against the coast. And the wind will still move across the northern landscape. Life ultimately continues after the apocalypse. That is an understated but important part of Morrowind's world building. Not every location needs to participate in the central narrative. Some places simply exist, and that existence makes the world feel bigger. Dagon Fel therefore becomes a fascinating counterpoint to places like the Red Mountain. Red Mountain is the center of the world's crisis. Dagon Fel is almost completely outside it. One contains the villain Dagoth, the other contains people trying to survive another day. The contrast makes both locations more convincing. If every settlement were constantly involved in enormous events, Morrowind would feel artificial. Dagon Fel prevents that. It demonstrates that history can be happening somewhere else, while life continues normally here. Ultimately, Dagon Fel earns its place among the places in the Elder Scrolls where almost nothing happens. because its greatest feature is precisely its lack of importance. It is a remote settlement on the northern edge of Vardenfell, surrounded by ocean, wilderness, ancient ruins, and an enormous world that rarely seems to care that it exists. While the Nerevarine is uncovering conspiracies and preparing to confront Dagoth, the people of Dagon Fell continue living their quiet lives. There are no grand armies gathering in the streets, no major political speeches, and no world-ending battle that takes place beneath its buildings. Instead, there is simply a small community existing at the edge of civilization. That apparent insignificance is what makes it so valuable to Morrowind. Dagon reminds us that Tamriel is supposed to be larger than the player. Not every person is waiting for a prophecy to be fulfilled. Not every settlement needs a legendary hero to give it meaning. Sometimes a place can simply be a place. The people can wake up, work, eat, sleep, and repeat the same routines without ever becoming part of history. And in a game filled with gods, prophecies, wars, and ancient evils, that ordinary existence makes Dagon Fell one of the most fascinating locations of all. There are plenty of settlements across the Elder Scrolls Oblivion that feel small, quiet, or out of the way, but few capture that sense of insignificance quite like Pal's Gate. Located in the Imperial Province's vast countryside, Pal's Gate is so tiny that it can almost feel like the game forgot to finish building it. There are only a handful of buildings, a very small population, and almost nothing that immediately suggests this place should matter to the larger world. While the rest of Cyrodiil is being consumed by the Oblivion Crisis, Daedric armies are invading cities, the Emperor is dead, the future of the Empire is hanging by a thread. Pal's Gate seems almost completely detached from everything happening around it. The village continues existing quietly in the countryside, as though the apocalypse is taking place somewhere else entirely. Its most significant connection to the wider game is the Umbra quest, which sends the player here to investigate the strange warrior and the sword carrying that same name. Outside of that storyline, however, Pal's Gate has remarkably little purpose. It isn't a major trading centre, political capital, military fortress, or religious destination. It is simply a tiny settlement sitting in the wilderness, and that almost complete lack of importance makes it one of the most fascinating examples of a place in Oblivion where, for the most part, nothing happens. The first thing that makes Pal's Gate unusual is its size. It is microscopic compared with the major cities of Cyrodiil. Imperial City is enormous. Chorrol has sprawling streets, Skingrad possesses wealthy estates and vineyards, Anvil has its harbour, even small towns such as Hackdirt feel more substantial in certain respects. Pal's Gate, by comparison, feels more like a collection of homes than an actual settlement. There is no grand entrance, no towering walls, no enormous central square, no impressive skyline. You could walk through much of the village in almost no time at all. That physical smallness immediately communicates its lack of importance. There is simply not enough here to support the idea that Pal's Gate is a major destination. And yet, it exists. People live here, families have homes, there are routines, the villagers go about their lives. That makes the location strangely believable. Not every settlement in Cyrodiil would realistically be a thriving city. Some would be little more than farming communities. Remote villages, clusters of houses connected by local roads. Pal's Gate fits that category perfectly. Its significance therefore becomes part of its charm. The village also benefits enormously from its surroundings. The countryside around Pal's Gate is peaceful. There are no towering mountains dominating the horizon, no enormous military camps, no Oblivion Gate permanently looming over the settlement. Instead, the landscape feels ordinary. Fields stretch into the distance, trees surround the roads. The countryside carries on as though the world isn't ending. That becomes particularly interesting when considering the timeline of Oblivion. The game takes place during one of the greatest crises Tamriel has ever experienced. Maroon's Dagon's forces have invaded Nirn. Oblivion gates are opening across Cyrodiil. Cities are under threat. Kvatch has already been destroyed. The Emperor has been assassinated. Martin's Septim is desperately trying to prevent the destruction of the Empire. And yet Pal's Gate barely seems affected. The villagers are not assembling an army. They aren't fleeing in enormous numbers. They aren't holding emergency meetings about the crisis. Life simply continues. This isolation creates an interesting contrast with the game's major locations. Travel to Kvatch and the Oblivion crisis becomes impossible to ignore. The city is literally burning. Daedra roam its streets, survivors crowd around the chapel. Travel to Bruma, and the threat becomes equally obvious. The Great Gate is eventually opened outside the city. The entire region becomes a military staging ground. Pal's Gate has none of that. The crisis exists elsewhere. For the villagers, it is almost background noise. Perhaps they have heard rumours. Perhaps travellers have told stories about the gates. But nothing immediately changes their lives. This is what makes the village feel almost frozen outside the main narrative. The most significant reason players are likely to visit Pal's Gate is Umbra. The quest surrounding the mysterious sword provides the village with its primary connection to the wider world. Umbra is not simply another weapon. The sword possesses a dark history and an unusually powerful enchantment. The warrior carrying it, also called Umbra, has become a dangerous figure. The player eventually discovers that the situation surrounding the sword is far more complicated than a simple treasure hunt. Without Umbra, Pal's Gate would have remarkably little relevance to the game's main narrative. That is not necessarily a criticism. In fact, it makes the location more interesting. The village isn't important because a major character was born there. It isn't the site of an important political event. It isn't a strategic military position. It is important because for a brief period, something strange happens there. Then the player leaves, and the village goes back to being Pal's Gate. That temporary importance perfectly fits the theme of locations where almost nothing happens. The Umbra quest essentially gives Pal's Gate its moment in the spotlight. For a short time, the player has a reason to investigate the settlement. There is mystery, there is danger, there is a legendary sword. But once that story concludes, there is little reason to return. The village does not suddenly become a major centre of activity. It remains tiny, it remains remote, it remains largely irrelevant to the larger political events of Cyrodiil. This is an important distinction between Pal's Gate and the major cities. Cities in Oblivion are designed to generate activity. Guilds operate there, nobles live there, merchants trade. Quests begin and end. Pal's Gate is relatively different. It feels like a place where the player can simply stop. There is no urgent reason to remain. No major organisation needs your assistance. No ruler is waiting for an audience. No enormous marketplace demands exploration. The village almost feels like a pause button within the wider world. That quietness can actually make it more immersive. Real worlds contain places that have no historical importance. Most villages never become famous. Most people never meet emperors. Most communities never fight alongside legendary heroes. Pal's Gate reflects that reality. Its residents are not protagonists. They are simply people. Their lives don't need to become part of Tamrielic history to matter. This is one of the most overlooked strengths of Oblivion's world design. The game doesn't make every location equally important. Some places exist purely to make the province feel inhabited. Pal's Gate is one of the clearest examples. Its tiny scale reinforces the feeling that Cyrodiil contains countless communities beyond the handful that players regularly visit. And perhaps that's the entire point. The hero's journey is enormous within the game. The village's story is tiny. The contrast makes both feel more believable. Ultimately, Pal's Gate earns its place among the places in the Elder Scrolls where almost nothing happens because it feels like one of the few settlements that exist without needing to justify its existence through constant adventure. It is incredibly small, almost microscopic compared with Cyrodiil's major cities, and its role in the wider game is surprisingly limited. Its greatest moment comes through the Umbra quest, which temporarily transforms the otherwise quiet village into the setting for a mysterious and dangerous encounter involving one of the most infamous swords in Tamriel. Once that story is finished, however, Pel's Gate returns to its normal state, a tiny settlement surrounded by countryside, almost completely disconnected from the enormous events unfolding elsewhere. The Oblivion Crisis is consuming Cyrodiil, but Pel's Gate remains strangely untouched by the chaos. No Daedric army storms its streets. No major political movement begins there. No great battle determines the fate of the Empire. The villagers simply continue living their lives while history happens somewhere beyond the horizon. And that is precisely what makes Pel's Gate so interesting. It isn't a forgotten city hiding a massive secret or a ruined settlement waiting to be restored. It's something much rarer in an Elder Scrolls game. A place that doesn't need anything to happen. It simply just exists. The Elder Scrolls Oblivion is a game that thrives on involvement. From the moment you step out of the sewers and into the rolling hills of Cyrodiil, the game is relentlessly alive. Oblivion gates rip the sky open, mysterious cults plot to bring about the end of the world, and every inn, ruin, or roadside shrine has the potential to plunge you into a new adventure. Even the roads, often assumed to be safe, are littered with bandits, wild animals, and the occasional Daedric worshipper. But in a game built on discovery, there is one place that dares to be different. One location that resists the gravitational pull of storytelling. A space that exists not because it's important, but because it simply is nothing. That place is the central wilderness of the City Isle. Nestled just outside the Imperial City walls, and paradoxically, right in the middle of the game's map, it is, without question, the only place in Oblivion where almost nothing happens. And that makes it one of the most fascinating places in the game. When you first arrive in the Imperial City, you expect grandeur. The capital of the Empire looms large on the horizon from the moment you exit the tutorial. Massive, majestic, and central to the game's lore, it serves as the hub of commerce, politics, and the power in Cyrodiil. So naturally, you'd expect the area surrounding it to be equally vital. But that's not what you find. If you step outside the walls, particularly to the west and north, you'll find yourself in an area so devoid of activity that it almost feels unfinished. Only one quest in this vicinity actually starts here, the Collector quest. No enemies spawn except for a couple of bandits. No dungeons lie buried beneath the soil except for one cave. Just trees, grass, and silence. There is only one skill book in this area, and a couple of Nirnroot. It's a part of the world the game invites you to overlook. A stretch of forest and open land that surrounds the most important city in Tamriel, and yet serves no mechanical, narrative, or emotional function. You can walk through it, sure, but nothing will happen if you do. And the strangest part is, it's right in the center of the map. The central wilderness of the City Isle feels like a glitch in the design philosophy of Oblivion. This is a game that rewards curiosity. Poke your nose into any cave and you'll probably come out with a new quest and a Daedric artifact. Talk to a stranger on the road and you might find yourself wrapped up in a political conspiracy. Yet here, in the one place where you'd expect the most activity, the game gives you nothing but some ruins and one unoccupied fort. It's not just that it's quiet, it's that it's completely disengaged. The quests that begin in the Imperial City never ask you to come out here. The factions never reference it. The main quests don't touch it at all. It is neither a destination nor a journey. It is simply just there. Which begs the question, why? Why did Bethesda, a company known for packing its maps with detail, carve out a piece of real estate in the middle of the world and leave it barren? Was this a design oversight? Or was it, in some strange and subtle way, intentional? What makes the City Isle wilderness so special isn't just that it's quiet. It's that it's really the only place that's quiet. Yes, there are many other places in Oblivion that replicate this, but seeing as this is directly near the capital city, makes it very odd. Oblivion is a loud game. Its world is filled with ambient sounds, aggressive combat, over-the-top dialogue, and the ever-present hum of threat. You're either fighting, running, looting, or listening to someone yell at you about mud crabs. It's not a subtle experience. The pacing is constant. The game rarely gives you a chance to breathe. But wander into the silent woods west of the Arcane University, and suddenly everything slows down. There are no enemies, no music cues. You could take your hands off the keyboard and nothing would change. It's eerie not because it's dangerous, but because it's not. In a world built on tension, the absence of conflict feels unnatural. It's like you've slipped behind the curtain and found the part of the stage that wasn't meant for the audience. To call this area forgotten is almost too generous. Neglected might be more accurate. Unlike Stendarr's Beacon in Skyrim, which has at least a name and a structure, this region of Oblivion doesn't even get that much. It's not labelled, it's not described in dialogue, it has no map markers or identifying features. It's just background. If you take a look at the Oblivion interactive map, you can see the very minimal aspects that the wilderness near City Isle has. The only marked and named places are the ruins you see after you step out from the tutorial and the unoccupied fort. And yet, it's not quite wilderness either. It's not rugged or treacherous or inaccessible. It's manicured, peaceful in a way. It's almost too perfect, like a test map that was never deleted. The trees are evenly spaced, the lighting is soft, the grass doesn't seem to react to the rest of the game's systems. It's as if the laws of Oblivion physics don't quite apply here, which weirdly makes it feel sacred. This is the place the developers forgot to corrupt, the one piece of land that survived the onslaught of content design. Here's where things get philosophical. What does it mean for a place to be empty in a game like Oblivion? In traditional game design, emptiness is often seen as a flaw, a missed opportunity, a lack of polish, a hole that needs to be filled. But in the context of Oblivion, which saturates its world with activity, maybe this emptiness is the point. Maybe this patch of forest sitting silently beneath the towers of white gold is meant to be untouched. Maybe it's Bethesda's way of giving the player space to think, to stop, and to just be. Think about it. Everything in Oblivion tries to get your attention. A-lead ruins glow from a distance, NPCs shout rumours at you, even the sky isn't safe, torn open by fiery portals. But this one place asks for nothing. And in a world where everything is loud, a space that stays quiet becomes its own kind of story. There is something poetic about this patch of wilderness. The Imperial City, the literal heart of the Empire, pulses with life. Its districts are dense with politics, crime and culture, and surrounding it, one would expect that the same energy to radiate outward. But instead we get silence. It's almost symbolic. At the center of power, there is stillness. At the heart of chaos, there is calm. It echoes that old saying, in the eye of the storm, there is peace. This is that eye. Walk a mile in any direction and you'll be attacked or roped into someone's drama. But here on this quiet island in the center of the world, the storm calms. Yes, you might be greeted by some bandits at the ruins or mud crabs and wolves, but other than that, nothing. And that contrast between the madness of the world and the serenity of this place is what makes it so powerful. In most Elder Scrolls games, we find meaning in ruins, Aelid temples, crumbling forts, and long-dead castles. These are the leftovers of history, places that tell stories through decay. But this patch of forest is different. It's not a ruin of stone, it's a ruin of purpose. It's what happens when a place is so irrelevant that even time forgets it. There are no skeletons here, no traps, no journals or relics, just untouched nature. It's not that the story happened and left. It never arrived at all, which in a way makes it the rarest kind of ruin, a ruin that never was. And when looking at the unoccupied fort and the ruin you see after the tutorial, This might just tell some stories, but they still create a sense of emptiness when doing so. From the couple of bandits you meet guarding it, to finding that one skill book in Nirnroot, it still feels like nothing compared to the rest of the game's chaos. However, the most haunting part of this wilderness is that it doesn't try to explain itself. Bethesda doesn't fill it with environmental clues, there's no secret backstory waiting to be uncovered, no dialogue lines hidden in the construction set, no developer commentary about how it was supposed to be something else. It simply just exists, and because it offers no answers, it forces the player to supply their own. Why is this place so empty? What was supposed to happen here? Is it an accident, a relic, a secret? In that silence, we find the possibility of meaning. We start to wonder, and that wondering, that tension between absence and imagination, is what gives the place its power. However, seeing as the wilderness north and west of the Imperial City is so empty, it begs to display Bethesda's understanding of creating a beautiful world. Not everything in the Elder Scrolls needs to be set on fire or executed. Sometimes that place that doesn't try to be something it's not makes it one of the most beautiful places on the map. In a game as noisy and densely packed as Oblivion, the most remarkable thing you can find isn't a weapon or a quest. It's peace. The central wilderness of the City Isle is the only place in the game where almost nothing happens. 1 or 2 fights, no dialogue, and a couple of secrets. But also, some grass, trees, and time. And maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's a gift. A reminder that even in a world built on fantasy and violence, there is room for silence, for stillness, and for nothing. So the next time you're rushing from the arena district to the market, take a detour, step outside the walls, walk into the woods, and just listen. Because in a game where everything screams for your attention, the place that says nothing at all might just be the one worth listening to. Skyrim is a game that thrives on chaos. Dragons descend from the sky to attack unsuspecting villagers, bandits demand your money or your life, and vampires can turn even the safest city into a blood-soaked nightmare. Every road leads to an adventure, and every cave promises danger, treasure, or both. Yet in this sprawling living world, there is one place that defies the very nature of Skyrim. One location where nothing happens at all. A place forgotten by the game itself. That place is known to be Stendarr's Beacon. Why is it that this lonely outpost, perched on the southeastern edge of the map, might just be the most intriguing place in all of Skyrim? When you first stumble upon Stendarr's Beacon, you might think it's like any other location in Skyrim. After all, the game conditions us to expect something, anything when we enter a new area. Maybe there's a quest here, a hidden treasure, a secret boss. Skyrim loves to reward exploration, so surely something is waiting at the top of this hill. But as you approach, the realization dawns, there's nothing here. Stendarr's Beacon is an outpost for the Vigilants of Stendarr, a faction devoted to hunting down Daedra and those who consort with them. But unlike other faction locations in Skyrim, the College of Winterhold, the Thieves Guild, or the Dawn Guard, this place serves no real function. You can't join the Vigilants, they don't give you quests, and aside from a handful of NPCs pacing around and mumbling about Stendarr's mercy, there's almost no reason to be here. Even when you do encounter the Vigilants elsewhere in the game, they don't talk about Stendarr's Beacon at all. It's almost like Bethesda put it in the game and then forgot about it. Which raises the question, why does it even exist at all? To understand the emptiness of Stendarr's Beacon, we need to talk about the Vigilants of Stendarr. On paper, they seem like a faction that should be important. Their whole thing is fighting Daedra, which in-game, literally called the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, sounds like it should matter. But it doesn't. The Vigilants exist as a cautionary tale, a group of self-righteous zealots who vastly overestimate their own strength. Their reliance on simple weapons, robes, and faith makes them laughably weak against any major threat. They claim to be Skyrim's protectors, but they get absolutely annihilated the second a real Daedric threat appears. This is made painfully clear when you start the Dawnguard DLC. The very first thing you learn, the Vigilants of Stendarr are dead. The entire hall of the Vigilant has been wiped out by vampires, and if you go there, all you'll find are corpses and destructions. Harkon's forces didn't just attack them, they exterminated them. It's one of the only times Skyrim tells you outright these people lost. There was no grand battle, no heroic last stand, just failure. And Stendarr's beacon? It's the last vestige of this failed order. A tiny group of survivors clinging to the ruins of their beliefs. They don't fight back, they don't rally a resistance, they just exist. It's strange to call anything in Skyrim forgotten, because for the most part, Bethesda designed the game to be engaging no matter where you go, even in remote locations like an abandoned shack in the woods. These often hold some kind of story, but Stendarr's beacon doesn't. It's just there. Even its geography makes it feel unimportant. It's off in the corner of the map, sitting awkwardly between Riften and the border of Morrowind. If you're not actively looking for it, you'll probably never find it at all. And even if you do find it, you'll probably never return. Think about it, how many times have you actually visited Stendarr's beacon in your playthroughs of Skyrim? I'll bet the answer is either once or maybe twice, if you were really trying to 100% the map. But after that, it fades into the background, overshadowed by the countless locations that actually do something. But here's where things get interesting. What if the fact that nothing happens at Stendarr's beacon actually makes it the most fascinating place in the game? Think about it. Skyrim is a world teeming with adventure. Everywhere you turn, something is demanding your attention. Even the smallest caves or roadside ruins have something. A note, a body, an ambush, something to interact with. The game is meticulously crafted to keep you engaged at all times. And yet, in the middle of all that, Bethesda left a space where nothing happens. A true outpost of nothingness. This could be intentional. Stendarr's beacon might be a relic of a different design philosophy. One where not everything needed to have a purpose. It stands as a rare example of restraint in game design, where the developers simply let a place be, rather than turning it into yet another piece of content. Or maybe they just forgot to add anything interesting. Who really knows at this point? In a game filled with grand narratives, maybe Stendarr's beacon is meant to be a moment of quiet reflection. The few vigilants who remain, despite knowing they are doomed, still uphold their duty. It presents a rare, almost tragic picture of perseverance. There is something poetic about this last stand that never turns into an actual battle. Maybe we're not supposed to fight here. Maybe for once we are just supposed to observe. In a way, this silence feels intentional. Bethesda gives us countless battles, betrayals, and supernatural horrors throughout Skyrim. But at Stendarr's beacon, there is only stillness. The remaining vigilants continue their prayers, seemingly unaware that they have already lost their war. This eerie, contemplative atmosphere forces the player to consider something rare in Skyrim, a battle that has already been lost, with no way to change its outcome. It's a type of storytelling that works precisely because nothing happens. Other locations give you a chance to intervene, to change the fate. Stendarr's beacon doesn't. It stands as a reminder that some things in the world, both in fiction and reality, are beyond saving. Perhaps that's why it feels so unsettling. We're so used to Skyrim letting us be the hero, that when we find a place where heroism is meaningless, it stands out. And that makes Stendarr's beacon one of the most haunting places in the game. One of the most fascinating things about Stendarr's beacon is that its true story isn't told through dialogue, quests, or scripted events. It's something you have to piece together. Skyrim is a game that often hands the player grand narratives, but here Bethesda takes a different approach. Instead of giving you a story, they leave behind the absence of one, forcing you to ask your own questions. Why didn't the Vigilants rally after the destruction of their hall? Why don't they seem to acknowledge their inevitable demise? Are they stubbornly holding on to their faith? Or are they just waiting for the end? There are no answers, only the silence of a forgotten outpost. In a way, this makes Stendarr's beacon one of the most immersive locations in Skyrim. It doesn't spell anything out for you, and yet its existence tells a story of failure, loss, and quiet resilience. It challenges the player to think beyond the game's mechanics, to consider what happens when a faction that was supposed to protect the world simply ceases to matter. Maybe that's why it feels so eerie. Stendarr's Beacon is a place where the story has already ended, but the characters just haven't realised it yet. And in a game where the player is always the centre of a narrative, finding a place where you don't matter is something truly rare. One of Skyrim's greatest strengths is how its world changes as you play. Cities react to your choices, factions rise and fall, and even the Civil War reshapes the land. But Stendarr's Beacon stands apart because it never changes. No matter how many dragons you slay, how many Daedric princes you defy, or even if you side with the vampires and wipe out the Dawn Guard, the beacon remains the same. Stendarr's Beacon is the only place in Skyrim where nothing happens, and in a way, that makes it one of the most thought-provoking locations in the game. It's a monument to a faction that failed, a place left behind by a world that has long since moved on. It's a reminder that not everything in a game needs to have purpose, and that sometimes the most interesting places are the ones that don't try to be. So the next time you're wandering through the mountains of Skyrim, take a moment to visit Stendarr's Beacon. Climb to the top, look out over the land, and appreciate the silence. Because in a world as chaotic as Skyrim, sometimes nothing happening is the most meaningful thing of all. Skyrim is a world that thrives on momentum. Cities clash over ancient thrones, guilds pull you into webs of political intrigue, and every crypt, cave, and corner seems to contain a secret just waiting to be uncovered. The land is teeming with activity, bursting with possibility, and yet nestled in the snow-covered hills west of Solitude stands a tower so overlooked, so unremarkable, that it feels like the world has simply passed by it. That place is Pinefrost Tower. To call Pinefrost Tower a location almost feels generous. It's not much more than a crumbling ruin sitting on a ridge staring blankly into the cold northern sky. Most players won't even know it exists. It's not marked on the map until you get really close. No one ever mentions it. No quest points you there. And once you arrive, there's no reward, no confrontation, no narrative breadcrumb to follow. There's just nothing. Some places in Skyrim are forgotten not because of their location, but because of their silence. Last time we explored a lonely outpost in the southeast, a beacon, Stendarr's Beacon, that stood vigil for a war that never came. This time we travel in the opposite direction, both geographically and spiritually, to another structure that's been abandoned not with fire or blood, but with indifference. When you first spot Pinefrost Tower, it seems to hint at significance. A tall stone structure, partially intact, sits like a lone sentinel over the snowy landscape. It has the air of something meaningful. Maybe a lookout post from the days of Skyrim's early history, a lost military outpost, a secret bandit den. Skyrim trains you to expect something, and so naturally you investigate. But when you reach the top, all you find is a dead bandit, a bedroll, and a chest with some randomized loot and some gold. That's it. No journals, no letters, no ghosts, no traps, no clever puzzles. In a game so dense with content, Pinefrost Tower feels like an absence. It gives you a named location and then offers absolutely nothing to justify the existence. Even the most inconsequential caves in Skyrim often have a bit of flair. A skeleton posed dramatically, a scrawled note, a bit of visual storytelling. But Pinefrost Tower has none of that. It is a place that dares to do nothing at all. Skyrim rarely leaves you alone. Even its silence usually comes with meaning. A barren tundra might lead you to a hunter's cabin. A still lake might conceal a sunken chest. But the tower is one of the only places where the silence is total. The game doesn't try to pull you deeper. It doesn't whisper a story in your ear. It just stands there. This is a place where the world stops speaking to you. There's no music cue, no ambient tension, just wind and snow and stone. You can almost imagine that Bethesda placed it there as kind of a forgotten placeholder, a landmark that was going to matter and then didn't. A tower built for a quest that never got written, or maybe it was never meant to matter. Maybe it was always supposed to be a place that simply exists, and in that way it becomes strangely poetic. If Pinefrost Tower does have a story, it's one you have to invent yourself. Why was the tower built? Who lived here? Was it ever manned by soldiers, or was it always just another waypoint in Skyrim's vast, uncaring wilderness? There's a strange kind of sadness to it. The dead bandit at the top wasn't killed in some epic battle. There was no scorch marks, no arrows, no drama. It looks like they just stopped living one day. Their body, like the tower, is a remnant without a reason. You could imagine them as a fugitive hiding from the law, taking shelter in the ruins only to succumb to the cold or starvation. Maybe they were trying to start a new life out there, away from the chaos of the world. Maybe they were just passing through, but Skyrim evidently gives you nothing. No prompt, no text, no closure. And in doing so, it opens a vacuum your imagination can fill, but only if you choose to, because the game itself does not really care. There's something powerful about a place like Pinefrost Tower. In a game that constantly rewards you with XP, gold, dialogue decisions, Pinefrost Tower offers only a bit of that. It is content without consequence, a landmark without law. And in that sense, it almost feels subversive. Modern games, especially open-world RPGs, are obsessed with making every corner of the map matter. Developers cramming collectibles, quest hooks, Easter eggs, and side stories to make every step feel productive. But here, Pinefrost Tower quietly resists that philosophy. It is one of the few places in Skyrim that trusts the player to be okay with not being rewarded. It dares to offer an experience that's purely atmospheric. You reach the summit, look out over the snow-covered peaks, hear the wind howl, and that's it. No fanfare, no deeper meaning, just a moment of stillness in a game obsessed with movement. The only real sense that makes it feel like a place in Skyrim is the 2-leveled frost trolls or ice wraiths that greet you. But even then, that all feels irrelevant. Unlike Skyrim's grand ruins, ancient Nord barrows and Dwemer cities frozen in time, Pinefrost Tower is a modern relic. It doesn't belong to some mythical civilization, it's not tied to the gods or the dragons. It's just a ruin. And that makes it feel weirdly grounded. This is not a ruin of legend, this is a ruin of circumstance. It could have been a military outpost, a bandit lookout, a hunter's retreat. And like so many forgotten places in our own world, it simply fell out of use. Now it decays, ignored, and unimportant. Its stone walls aren't lined with glowing crystals, its secrets are not protected by puzzles. There are no ghosts here, only echoes. This place never changes. No quest sends you back here, no character ever mentions it. It isn't updated or reused in DLC, and once you visit it, it remains exactly as you left it. And that makes it one of the rarest things in all of Skyrim. A place that exists entirely outside the story. You cannot affect it, and it does not affect you. That kind of narrative isolation is rare in games, and even rarer in Skyrim. Almost every other location in the game is connected to something bigger, but Pinefrost Tower feels like a place that exists purely for itself. It doesn't care whether you're the Dragonborn, or a wandering thief, or a lost alchemist. You are irrelevant here, and in that irrelevance, there is some kind of freedom. What Pinefrost Tower truly reveals is the strange luxury of a world that's too large to be entirely known. Skyrim is a curated experience, but it also allows for the possibility of places that fall through the cracks. Pinefrost isn't broken, bugged, or glitched. It's just there. It doesn't tie into any of the game's main systems, it doesn't complete a checklist. And that might be the most honest kind of realism Skyrim offers. Because in the real world, not every ruin has a plaque, not every corpse has a diary, Sometimes things are abandoned and no one remembers why. Sometimes a place just exists, quietly eroding under the snow and time. That's what this tower is, a digital ghost of intention. Maybe half built and half forgotten, it doesn't need you to be there. But the fact that you found it, the fact that you noticed its absence of meaning, makes it meaningful in a completely different way. Pine Frost Tower is a place in Skyrim where nothing happens. And in a world built on chaos, that makes it feel unforgettable. It is a monument to nothingness. A tower without a purpose, a ruin without a story, a location the game itself seems to have forgotten. And maybe that's why it matters. Because in a game where you are always the hero, always the center of the universe, this tower offers something rare. A moment of quiet, a place that asks for nothing of you. A reminder that not every story needs a conflict, and not every place needs a point. Sometimes the most powerful locations are the ones that let you feel small. Some places in Skyrim aren't meant to be noticed. They sit off the road, not on it. They glow with no torches, no name hovers over the screen, until you're nearly at the doorstep. No quests, no characters of note, but they're still watching you. On the cold coast of East Windhelm where snow sinks into the sea and the wind forgets to blow, there's a cabin. It's called Trader's Post, and nothing ever happens here. But it exists. And somehow that makes it worse. Trader's Post is a small wooden house built where no one should live. It clings to the edge of Skyrim's northeastern coast, north of Mixwater Mill, southeast of Windhelm, and surrounded by silent falling snow. No road leads to it, no map points you in its direction. And when you finally stumble across it, if you ever do, it doesn't greet you with dialogue or narrative. It doesn't even introduce itself. It just squats there, abandoned and still, like it's trying to forget it was ever built. But someone is there. Bandits live inside, but not many, just 3. As if they can't even be bothered to show up in numbers. There are bear traps laid across the snow outside, carefully arranged, rusted open, some half buried under thin layers of snow. They're not meant for you, well, not specifically, they're just there. Sprung, waiting, forgotten, like someone put them out one night in fear and never came back to check them, or like they've become a ritual, something the bandits do out of habit. Inside there are crates, a bedroll, a few scattered items and some minor loot. No books, no journals, one chest that is almost worth writing home about. No name on the mail, no dreams on the pillow, just a place, just a cabin and just a post. A post for what though? That's the question Skyrim never answers. Trader's Post is a loaded name. It implies betrayal, a hidden history, maybe a secret meeting ground for someone who fled a war, maybe a last stand for someone who changed sides, maybe a forgotten outpost for soldiers who never made it back. But the game never tells you who the traitor was. There are no letters on the table, no burnt flags, no signs of conflict or identity. Just bandits who don't speak and traps that don't matter. The name stands on its own, however, like a ghost of meaning. The kind of name that feels left over from a story they never got written. Or one that was erased on purpose. The bandits in Trader's Post are exactly what you expect. Hostile, forgettable, functionally identical to every other trio of low-level thugs in Skyrim. They don't carry unique names, they don't have unique loot, they don't even have a unique formation. One waits outside, one stands on the porch, one paces in the snow. It's as if the game placed them there using a template, just enough to make you draw your sword, but not enough to make you ask why they're there. And maybe that's the point, because these bandits aren't protecting anything. They're not holding down turf, they're not hiding stolen gold or rare treasure. They're just occupying a space that no one else wanted. They're just filling the silence. If you open the map, Trader's Post barely registers. The area east of Windhelm is cold, flat, and mostly devoid of landmarks. No cities, no quests, no Daedric shrines or dragon burials. It's a space in Skyrim that feels like a canvas no one painted on. Even the snow here seems tired. Nearby are a few animals, some sparse tundral plants, and the occasional hunter or a saber cat. But there's no real reason to be here. No faction will send you this way. No courier will deliver a letter with a clue. No NPC will ever say the words Trader's Post out loud. The house just waits, but not for you, and not for anyone else. In-game development, not everything gets to be finished. Some places were meant to host a quest that got cut. Some locations were built for encounters that never got written. And sometimes, things were added to break up travel distance, to fill space, to keep the world from feeling empty. But here's the irony. Trader's Post feels empty anyway. It has bandits, it has traps, it has a name and a location and a geometry. But it doesn't have anything else. It feels like the house itself was forgotten mid-sentence, as if a designer put it in, planning to come back, and never did. Unlike other abandoned homes in Skyrim, places like the Abandoned Shack or the Alchemist's Shack, Trader Post doesn't tell a story through bones or blood. No skeleton slumped over a desk, no journal half-written, no lingering spell effects or strange music cues. Nothing supernatural, nothing emotional, nothing memorable. And that's what makes it feel so uncanny, because the lack of detail here isn't atmospheric, it's unsettling. It's like the house is trying to disappear, like it knows it shouldn't exist, but yet it does. You won't be sent here, not by a Jarl, not by a mage, not by a Daedric prince. There's no side quest that leads you to the front door, no bounty notice that mentions this place. Not even radiant quests, those endlessly repeating objectives will pull you in. If you find this place, you find it alone. And nothing happens when you do. You only get one marker cleared, no dialogue opens, no music plays. You kill the bandits, check the containers, maybe spring a trap, and then you leave. That's it. And the game forgets you were ever there. Skyrim is somewhat of a game of noise. Dragons scream, shouts echoing in mountain passes, quest markers that pull you from cave to cave and city to city. But Trader's Post is quite opposite of that. It is a house defined by its lack of things, a moment on the map where no story happens, a named location that exists purely as a whisper. And like the old Roldan Inn or Pilgrim's Trench, its silence says something. Something about the world, something about forgotten places, and something about people who once mattered, and then didn't. Inside the shack at Trader's Post, there's a fire pit. The logs are in place, arranged as if someone meant to build a fire but never struck the flint. And that's the kind of detail that lodges in your memory. Because in Skyrim, fires are everywhere. Lit braziers, roaring hearths, torches in tombs. Warmth is a signal that life is near, but this one is quite cold. And it raises the question you can't answer. Were the bandits squatting here temporarily, waiting to move on? Were they left behind by a bigger gang, forgotten like the cabin itself? Or did someone else once live here? Someone who vanished before the flames ever caught? The fire feels symbolic of the whole location. Something half finished, something half remembered, half abandoned. Like someone stopped writing mid-page and never picked up the pen again. So the pit sits cold, not because it went out, but because it never burned in the first place. Most homes in Skyrim feel alive. Even abandoned ones hint at memory. Someone once cooked here, someone once fought here, and someone once prayed here. But Trader's Post doesn't. It doesn't remember anything, and it doesn't care that you're here. You can clear it, you can avoid it, you can return 20 levels later and find the same traps, the same nameless bandits, the same snow on the roof. It's not haunted, it's not cursed, it's just empty. A home with a name with no story. The only home in Skyrim where nothing happens. And maybe that's exactly why it stays with you. In a game like Skyrim, it's easy to overlook the quiet places. You're usually too busy slaying dragons, shouting enemies off cliffs, or watching entire cities crumble under civil war. But sometimes, if you stop rushing from quest marker to quest marker, you'll find something different. Not dangerous, not magical, just different. It's an inn, a simple wooden inn, like dozens of others scattered across Skyrim, but this one is different, because so few come here. No one needs it, and yet it's still here, waiting. This is Nightgate Inn, and it might just be the loneliest place in all of Skyrim. Nightgate Inn is located in the snowy nowhere between Windhelm and Dawnstar. It's not near a city, it's not even near a road. It sits awkwardly in the wilderness, tucked between snowbanks and crumbling trees like someone plopped it into the world and forgot to connect it to anything. You won't find any guards here, no shopkeepers, no children running around, just the wind, the snow, and a single man behind the counter. His name is Hadring. He runs the place, though it's never quite clear why. Let's talk about what makes this place so strange. First of all, I would like to point out that the inn, while it's out of the way from a lot of the Skyrim world, it did help me in some ways as I was making the perilous journey from Whiterun to Winterhold, for no apparent reason other than the fact that I was bored and didn't want to fast travel like everyone else. The inn made for a great resting stop as a blizzard started to kick up and my horse began to believe it was a bad idea to keep going. But anyway, in Skyrim, inns serve a purpose. In Whiterun, the Benned Mare is filled with locals, mercenaries, and travellers. In Riften, the Bee and Barb is packed with shady characters and drunks. They are social spaces, alive with conflict, conversation, and narrative potential. But Nightgate Inn? Nightgate Inn is silent. When you enter, there's no music. Just the low hum of a fire pit and the occasional cough from the man behind the bar. Sometimes a few NPCs will be there. The orc who basically just stays in the cellar every day, and Full Theme, an old man who basically also lives there as well even though he complains about it 24/7. This place does feel like a hiding spot, like it wasn't made for comfort. Comparing this to Whiterun's inn, the Benned Mare, in which you walk in and are immediately greeted by a man drumming or playing the flute, and more than one person sitting down. Nightgate Inn just seems like one of those ghost towns you'd find in the middle of the American desert. The main room of the inn gives off a vibe that it hasn't seen more than 20 people in the last few years, and that's what gives it such an odd vibe. This is where it gets weirder. There is no town around Nightgate Inn, no village, no associated mine, no travellers. It's not near a trade route, there's nothing to support it, and to be honest, the only reason I found it was because I was making the journey from Whiterun to Winterhold through the mountains. Most inns in Skyrim are placed where they make sense. Riverwood has one because it's a lumber town, Ivarstead has one because it's at the foot of the 7,000 steps. But Nightgate, it's the middle of nothing, which raises the question, why does this building actually exist? And who was it really meant to serve? But we don't really get an answer. Not in the game, not in the dialogue, and not in the lore. You could argue that it's for hunters or passerbys, but even that feels like a stretch. There are almost no random encounters nearby, no patrols, no carriages, no foot traffic. However, there's the odd chance that you do end up passing by a trio of people travelling to another town through the mountains. But you have to go out of your way to find this place. And when you do, it feels like you weren't supposed to be here at all. Like the world forgot to erase it. Let's talk about Hadring. He's the innkeeper. He has a little family who he talks about in his dialogue. He mostly only talks about how the inn was built by his great-grandad. No backstory and no apparent life outside of this single room. He's voiced by a generic Nord voice actor and says a few polite lines, but nothing more than what's prompted. And yet, he's always here, always behind the counter, as if he's waiting for something. He doesn't comment on dragons, or the war, or the death of the Emperor. Even though the world is collapsing, he just says, "Let me know if you need anything." And somehow, that's worse. It's one thing for a place to be somewhat abandoned. It's another for it to pretend it's still functioning, even when it clearly isn't. Nightgate Inn isn't just empty. It's worse than that. It's hollow. Here's the thing. Skyrim is a massive world. It's full of detailed cities, scripted quest hubs, branching dialogues. But there are also fragments, leftover corners, unexplored ideas, half-buried concepts that never really got finished. And Nightgate Inn might be one of them. It could have been meant for something bigger, a town that never got built, a quest line that was cut, a hub that lost its context. But instead of deleting it, Bethesda left it in, fully furnished, lightly populated, and completely detached from everything else. It's like finding a chair in an empty warehouse. You sit in it, but you can't shake the feeling that you weren't meant to. But most importantly, the Nightgate Inn probably just acts as a rest stop for any traveller who dares to go through the mountains. And that makes it one of the most remarkable places in Skyrim. A place that was built to house people, but houses almost no one. But who was Hadring before all this? There's no quest about Hadring and no journal. But this absence invites questions. Who is this man really? And why did he choose this place? We know that his great-granddad founded this inn. But given no one ever comes here, except for the Orc and Fultheme, why would he stay? Hadring could have run an inn in any major hold. Inns are always needed in cities like Solitude or Riften. Instead, he chose to live alone in a snow-blanketed ruin of a road, serving close to no one. Even bandits don't wander in. That's not bad business, that's intentional isolation. Maybe this place wasn't always empty. Maybe there was once a nearby lumber camp or a mountain pass that got buried. Maybe Hadring stayed behind when everyone else left. Or maybe he was sent here in exile, a punishment disguised as hospitality. He never complains, he never asks for help, he just waits, every day and every hour. Waiting for customers who never come, selling food no one eats, making beds no one sleeps in. And maybe, just maybe, he prefers it that way. Nightgate Inn might not be haunted by ghosts, but Hadring himself feels like one. A remnant of a forgotten purpose, a man who chose silence when the world had too much noise. What's truly eerie about Nightgate Inn is that you, the player, are often its first real visitor in years. When you walk in, nothing special happens. There's no cutscene, no quest marker. Just the quiet acknowledgement that you've stumbled into a place that rarely sees visitors. And that's where the discomfort begins. Because Skyrim is a game of recognition. Walk into Whiterun and people know your name. Bards sing about your exploits. Enemies run from your shouts. But at Nightgate Inn, no one knows you. No one even seems to care that you're there. It's like the world pauses, or maybe forgets you exist while you're inside. This makes Nightgate one of the few places in the game where your power means absolutely nothing. You could be the Dragonborn, or the listener of the Brotherhood, and Hadring still just shrugs and offers you a bed. And maybe that's why this place feels so lonely. Not because who's in it, but because of what it strips away from you. The attention, the purpose, the noise. For a few minutes, you're not a hero or a killer. You're just another quiet guest in a place that's trying to forget. Nightgate Inn isn't haunted. It isn't magical. There's no big twist, no boss fight, no secret treasure. It's just lonely. A perfectly good building, fully staffed with food, drinks, and beds. And no one to use it. A place made for community that has none. A space meant for warmth that now just holds air. And maybe that's the point. Because not everything in Skyrim has to be dramatic or epic or game-changing. Sometimes the emptiest places are the ones that speak the loudest.